ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Welcome to the 4 parks of Universal Orlando Resort, featuring the new Universal Epic Universe. With spectacular hotels, we offer a week of vacation excitement. Visit universalorlando.com.
EVO. This series contains adult language and depictions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Long before the nation of Czechoslovakia was carved from the clay of collapsing empires, long before Bohemia had a name, and long before the first stones of Houska Castle were mortared into place, there was the land and there was the whole. In the heart of dense forests, atop a hill that bore no water, overlooked no river, and guarded no road, early humans discovered a wound in the earth. This chasm wasn't wide, but it was deep. How deep, no one could say. They called it Czerna Usta, the black mouth. Around it, the animals would not wander. Even the wolves, bold and unrepentant, gave it a wide berth. Birds refused to nest in the trees that bent away from the hole, and the wind that howled out of its throat in winter carried no echo. It seemed not of earth, but of something beneath it. There were people who carved reindeer into stone, who buried their dead with beads made from bone and amber, who made sense of the world through patterns in stars and entrails. But this place, they would not paint. They wouldn't pray near it. They wouldn't camp nearby or forage the rich mushrooms that grew in the cool soil at the hill's base. Their avoidance gave birth to the first myths, of shadowy arms that reached up from below, of fire without light, of voices that mimicked but never matched. And mothers warned their children, the whole remembers names, don't give it yours. Even as tribal settlements grew in valleys and atop ridges nearby, the hill remained untouched. Neolithic farmers shaped the land, but left the wound untouched. Bronze Age chieftains raised offerings to the sky, but not here. And when the Celts swept through with their iron and their wild gods, they also avoided it. One legend passed through the oral traditions of early Slavic settlers told of a stag chased by hunters that leapt across the chasm, only to vanish midair, swallowed by shadow. Another tells of a shaman who danced too close to the edge during a solstice rite. His body was never found. Only a scorched tree remained, twisted like melted wax. To them, it was not simply a hole in the earth. It was a place where the laws of the world thinned, where the distance between life and death, between flesh and spirit, bent and frayed. No one dared descend. No one wanted to know what waited below. But the peace of primal fear is fragile. In time, men of reason, men with iron and crosses, men who served kings and carried banners, came to the forest. And they, unlike their ancestors, sought not to avoid the black mouth, but to contain it. Welcome back to The Devil Within. You're listening to the mysteries of Houska Castle. So, while I was researching the previous episode on the haunted castles of Europe, I came across one that was head and shoulders above all the rest in terms of mystery and fear and paranormal activity, and that's Houska Castle. From what I read, it deserves its own episode. Hope you enjoy. It was the year 1253, a time when Europe's kingdoms were still raw and smoldering from centuries of crusade, famine, and tribal warfare. In Bohemia, where the forest pressed close and roads were no more than rutted trails, a new king ascended, Ottokar II. Nicknamed the Iron and Golden King, he was an ambitious ruler, part warrior, part bureaucrat, determined to transform his fragmented realm into a civilized bastion of Christendom. And yet, among his many commissions, churches, fortresses, roads, monasteries, there was one structure that puzzled even his closest advisors. A castle to be built atop a lonely hill with no strategic value. There were no rivers to control, no borders to watch, and no towns to protect. The hill offered no elevation advantage, and the surrounding woods harbored no known enemies. Even stranger, the site lacked the essentials of a medieval stronghold: no natural spring, no fertile soil, and no nearby settlement to draw supplies from. And yet, the order came from the crown itself. A fortress was to be built. But not for defense, for containment. The site chosen was already legendary among locals. Whispers of ancient fear still clung to it like moss to stone. Ottokar's advisors, a curious mix of priests, stonemasons, and one peculiar monk from the east who spoke of ley lines, marked the hill as dangerous, not because of what threatened from without, but what threatened from beneath. Houska Castle rose from the hill in geometric defiance of its surroundings. Its architecture was strange, even by the loose standards of the day. The thickest walls faced inward. Defensive towers were built in odd, internal-facing directions, and the chapel, the heart of any castle's soul, was constructed not atop the highest point for visibility, but directly over the Black Mouth. The masons, drawn from across Bohemia and Saxony, worked quickly. Too quickly, some said. Their pay was doubled, their rations were rich, but many would not speak of their work after leaving. One stonemason, later confined to a monastery, carved only one image in the margin of his cell. A man, bound at the waist, being lowered into a darkness from which screams rose. They sealed the hole in the earth with massive stone slabs mortared with lime and ox blood. They chanted prayers over it. The chapel was consecrated 3 times by 3 different bishops. But it was not protection they built. It was quarantine. The walls of Houska were designed not to keep armies out, but to keep something in. The arrow slits accessible from defensive windows faced in. The gates were sturdy not for siege, but for lockdown. The towers provided no vantage point of the land surrounding, but of the central yard, where beneath all, the ancient chasm still lay. Even the frescoes were unusual. Grim-faced saints clutching spears, casting them again, not outward, but downward. And so, in the forested heart of Bohemia, what is now the Czech Republic, stood a castle with no enemy in sight, because its enemy was below. By the 1930s, Houska Castle had become a relic. The chapel had long since been decommissioned. Moss had grown over the stones. Local villagers still avoided the hill, but their fear had been eroded by time and poverty. In Prague, professors dismissed the ancient legends as pre-modern superstition. But in Berlin, there were men who listened very carefully. The Nazis, long before the war began in earnest, had turned their attention to the occult. Under Heinrich Himmler's direction, the SS established the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society, to explore the origins of the Aryan race. But the mandate quickly expanded. They searched for relics, for myths, for places where ancient power might be tapped. To the Ahnenerbe, Houska Castle was not an oddity. It was a gift. By 1939, with Czechoslovakia under Nazi occupation, SS operatives arrived at Houska. No public explanation was offered. A requisition order was quietly filed. The nearby roads were closed, villagers were relocated or screened for ideological reliability. A perimeter was established, and then the real work began. Unlike other Nazi-occupied castles that served as barracks or supply depots, Houska was not militarized in any traditional sense. The SS brought in scientists, physicists, biologists, even architects. More tellingly, they brought mystics. Members of the Thule Society, an esoteric nationalist group obsessed with ancient energies and lost civilizations, were given private quarters. They arrived with trunks full of scrolls, tomes bound in leather, and symbols that predated the swastika by centuries, maybe even millennia. The villagers, what few remained, reported strange occurrences immediately. Lights at all hours, an odd humming sound that traveled for miles, and the smell, something like sulfur and burning wood. Dogs refused to approach the hill, and birds vanished from the trees. Inside Houska, the Nazi operation grew secretive and layered. The chapel was sealed off. New rooms were carved beneath the foundations. The old pit, Cherna Usta, was unearthed. A field report recovered after the war described the first glimpse into the chasm. It recorded a depth of over 80 meters before darkness swallowed the light completely. Instruments lowered into the hole lost signal after a few seconds. One engineer noted that the echo pattern did not behave in accordance with acoustical physics. Then came the human trials. Prisoners from nearby holding camps were brought in under high security. These were men and women deemed expendable, political dissidents, degenerates, captured resistance fighters. They weren't told what was happening. In groups of 2 or 3, they were led into the chapel, strapped into harnesses, and lowered into the abyss. The Nazi doctors took notes. They timed the descents. They recorded the vitals of those retrieved. Most came back screaming. A handful came back silent, unable or unwilling to speak. 2 individuals died within minutes of reemergence, without word or apparent trauma. One young man in his 20s was pulled back up with his face locked in a smile, eyes open but unseeing. His hair had gone completely white. But it was not just the human trials that interested the Nazis. Below the chapel, they began constructing what they referred to as the interface. A reinforced chamber was built over the pit's opening with mechanical winches, recording devices, and antenna. Rituals were performed. Blood sacrifices of animals, and probably more, were whispered about. A red symbol, circular and lined with jagged shapes, was painted on the floor of the chapel above and since has been scrubbed away. Photographs survive only in fragments, but they survive. A notebook discovered years later beneath floorboards in the castle's northern wing, attributed to Dr. Friedrich Lachmann, details the bizarre observations made during these trials. Here's one entry. At precisely 3:13 a.m., the sound began again. A vibration through the floor, rhythmic, almost mechanical. Subject 7 spoke in Sumerian, though she had no known education in ancient languages. She carved something into the wall with her fingernails, a spiral with an eye. The energy in the room shifted. static on all radio bands. Internal temperature dropped by 9 degrees Celsius in less than a minute. One of the lamps exploded. Lockman's notes, erratic and terrifying, eventually devolved into diagrams and frantic repetitions of the word zurückhalten, which translates to hold back. Whatever they were doing, even they came to fear it. It's believed that Himmler himself visited the site in 1943. Though no photographs exist, an itinerary placing him in Prague aligns with the timeline. His interest in ancient Germanic mysticism was well documented, and he had grown impatient with the Ahnenerbe's lack of results. Houska, he believed, was a political weapon, if not of matter, then of mind. Psychological warfare, time distortion, even portals to other dimensions were not dismissed as science fiction. In the warped logic of the Third Reich, any terror was permissible, so long as it served the cause.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kann du Norsk?
If you've had that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like winding your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox disinfecting all-purpose cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz.
Spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
But even the SS had limits. By 1944, reports from Houska began to show signs of breakdown. Personnel turnover increased. Guards refused night shifts. One technician gouged out his eyes and threw himself from a tower. So the experiments were scaled back. Documents were destroyed en masse. But not every document. One surviving letter, found in a cache of Nazi correspondence unearthed in the 80s, written by a young soldier named Klaus Brewer to his superior, reads, "I urge cessation of the program at Houska. The outcomes defy explanation. The cost in human terms is extreme. Our presence there is a provocation to something we do not understand. It is not a gate, it is a prison, and we are weakening the bars." In early 1945, as the Red Army pushed westward, the Nazis abruptly evacuated Houska Castle. Equipment was either taken or burned. Several rooms were bricked up hastily. Locals reported smoke rising from the hill for days. When Soviet soldiers arrived, they found the castle abandoned, but not empty. In the chapel, they found bloodstains on the floor, deep gouges in the stone, and burned papers with symbols that resembled no known alphabet. In the underground chambers, they found shattered glass, broken restraints, and a smell that caused several to vomit. What they did not find was the bottom of the hole. So officially they were called, quote, volunteers, but the truth, as with much of Houska's wartime history, is stranger and darker than any euphemism. These were not volunteers in any conventional sense. They were prisoners, condemned men and women, political dissidents, captured resistance fighters, the homeless swept from the city streets, psychiatric patients deemed expendable. In the Nazi documentation that survived, their names are few, and their details vague. What is clear is this: they were lowered into the chasm that had remained sealed for centuries, and when they came back, something in them had broken. Some irreparable thread of humanity was frayed beyond repair. The procedure was ritualized. A makeshift elevator, fashioned from winches and steel cables, had been built directly above the pit in the chamber below the chapel. Each volunteer was restrained in a leather harness, their vitals monitored when equipment allowed, and most were given sedatives before the descent. A few were heavily drugged. Others were forced to remain lucid, completely sober. The duration of the descent varied. Some were lowered for minutes, others for as long as an hour. What they saw, if anything, was never consistently reported, but the effects were nearly always the same. Case files recovered in 1961 by a Czech historian named Jaromír Král contained brief medical summaries of the returned subjects. One entry reads, Subject number 12, male, approximately 30. Severe cognitive disassociation upon retrieval. Advanced hair graying. Dermatological symptoms resembling radiation exposure. Did not respond to speech or light. Screamed intermittently for 48 hours. Died of cardiac arrest on third day post-retrieval. Another file notes, subject number 7, female, age unknown, returned humming a lullaby in Latin. When questioned, she spoke briefly in what was later identified as pre-Christian Etruscan. She has no known history of education in this language, complained of a constant presence behind her left shoulder, refused to sleep indoors, died after ingesting shards of a broken mirror. So some patterns emerged. Many returned with significant physical aging. Wrinkles deepened overnight, hair turning white, muscle tone atrophied, teeth loosened. Some reported hallucinations or visitations. A repeated figure in testimonies was the smiling man in the dark or the one with the long fingers. A few survivors mentioned hearing something call their names, not audibly, but internally, as if from within their own bones. Most horrifying were those who returned altered in more subtle ways. One man was described as eerily normal by his attending officer, until he began cutting symbols into his own torso, methodically, with broken glass, while maintaining a calm expression. Another appeared fully functional, but would wake each night at precisely 3:17 a.m. and vomit black bile while speaking in a child's voice. Attempts to explain these phenomena were made even during the war. Nazi doctors hypothesized exposure to subterranean gases, temporal disorientation, even contact with electromagnetic anomalies, but none of the data aligned. One SS physician wrote in his final report, quote, "We are not witnessing trauma in the conventional sense. We're seeing violations of time, of identity, perhaps even dimensional integrity. These subjects have encountered something which reflects human consciousness back in distorted form." Something within the Ahnenerbe believed they were communing with an ancient intelligence. Others whispered of gateways, paths to older worlds, older gods. Perhaps the black sun that Nazi occultists believed fueled the hidden order of the cosmos. The abyss beneath Houska was not empty, they claimed. It was a threshold. A few accounts suggest attempts were made to send recording devices down the pit. One such effort, described in a partially redacted post-war journal, tells of a tethered microphone that recorded deep mechanical sounds, followed by what seemed to be hundreds of overlapping human voices whispering in synchronicity. The tape was destroyed after the war, but a German officer who heard it is reported to have remarked, "They're not speaking to us, they're warning each other." Then there were those who returned apparently unharmed. At first, these individuals were studied intensely, even transferred to other sites for long-term monitoring. But over time, they too simply unraveled. One survivor, placed in a sanitarium in Munich, began drawing elaborate star maps on the walls of his room, using his own feces and blood. Another became catatonic, responding only when exposed to the sound of Gregorian chant played backwards. To the very end of the Nazi presence at Houska, these human experiments continued. The last known volunteer, lowered just days before the SS retreated, was a young Czech partisan captured outside Liberec. His records are incomplete, but a scrap of his intake form remains. Under purpose, someone had scrawled, "Last descent, confirm connection." He was never retrieved. What exactly he saw or became has never been determined. Today, Houska Castle stands quiet atop its wooded hill in the Czech Republic, part tourist curiosity, part forgotten relic. The war is long past, the Iron Curtain is lifted, the Czech lands have traded kings for presidents and secret police for civil society. But Houska remains as it always was, watchful, reserved, and defiantly inexplicable. Visitors arrive by car or bus, snapping photos of the Gothic windows and steep gables. Guides tell stories of medieval legends and Nazi rituals with a smile, softening the edges of horror into something palatable for the curious. Children point at the chapel's ceiling frescoes depicting half-human beasts and winged tormentors. Some laugh nervously, others go silent. The chapel, still standing over the pit, remains the heart of the castle's mystique. Though the hole is no longer accessible, stories persist of drafty gusts rising from beneath, of candles flickering without wind, of shadows that lengthen without a source. Paranormal investigators have made regular pilgrimages to the site. Some claim to have captured disembodied voices on tape, whispers in archaic dialects, breathy laughter, low growls not heard during the recording. In 2009, a team from a European paranormal society conducted a week-long study within the castle walls. Their final report, though careful and professional, concluded, quote, "Instruments failed more frequently in the chapel than in any other location tested across Central Europe. Electromagnetic field surges were erratic, not attributable to wiring or natural magnetism. One team member experienced time loss, remembering only fragments of several hours. Physical illness, including nausea, migraines, and extreme fatigue, were consistently reported. We make no conclusions, only observations. Houska resists explanation," end quote. Meanwhile, the local villagers still treat the castle with quiet caution. Many refuse to speak of the past. Some refer to it only as Tavez, the tower. At least one farmer claims his cattle avoid the northern slope. Another swears that dogs will not cross the property line. A priest from a nearby town, when asked about Houska, once said, "It is a place for God's silence, not his voice." Politically, the region has changed hands several times since the castle's construction. From the Bohemian Kingdom to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, from Nazi occupation to Soviet control, and finally to the modern Czech Republic, Houska has outlived them all. Its stones have survived the churn of history, as if untouched by time or protected by it. And yet, even now, stories continue to surface. In 2016, a group of amateur urban explorers claimed to have spent the night inside the castle. Around 2 a.m., one of them live-streamed a video in which a voice, clear and unprompted, spoke a phrase none of them recognized. It was later translated by a Slavic linguist as Old Church Slavonic. It watches through you. The video was taken down within days. The explorers have since refused interviews. So Houska remains, not alive, but not dead, not haunted, but not clean. A castle built to seal, not to defend. A tomb built not for a man, but for something older. And whatever it is, it's still waiting, beneath stone and silence. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with someone who you think might also enjoy it. And hey, I'm posting on the Devil Within Pod on Instagram now. Check it out. Also, we have video content available on YouTube and Spotify. If you have any questions or comments or ideas for episodes, if you want to tell me your ghost stories, please email me at info@evocreative.com. That's info@evocreative.com. Until next time, stay safe out there. The Devil Within is an EVO production, recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil Within, I'm your host, Brandon Morgan.